Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06. It's Thursday morning in your nation's capital. Almost there. Tomorrow is Patrice Onwuka's favorite day of the week. Tomorrow is
Friday.
But not today. It's just Thursday today. But
why I
Patrice
don't
is
got a lot of
here, and
energy.
that makes it, I
Yes.
know. I wanted to hear it. Coming up at 6:35, Tiffany Polifko, member of the Loudoun County School Board, former member of the Loudoun County School Board. 7:05, Mary Margaret Olahan on an important story out of Daily Signal about the rash of attacks on churches. She's tabulated how many churches have been attacked in the last couple of years in America, and it is extraordinary, the number.
My goodness.
We'll give you all those details. And then at 8:05, Mark Morgan, he, of course, at the Heritage Foundation and the former acting commissioner of Custom and Borders Protection, CBP, talk about President Biden going to the border today and President Trump going to the border, but they're both going to see very different parts of the border.
I wish they would be there together. Wouldn't it be fun if they just stand
Right?
in front of the...
Where's our
Side by
unity I
side?
was promised? Let's come
I
together,
know, right?
everybody. Let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya at the border and fix the problem. That's all coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor. She's, as I mentioned, Patrice Onwuka.
Hey, good
And
morning, Larry.
Good morning, Patrice. Well, it was a bit of a stunner yesterday. I mean, I think we all sort of figured that Mitch McConnell's days were kind of numbered here, just in terms of the various disconcerting health moments we've seen from him. You know, of course, that startling moment about 6 months ago where he just froze at the podium
Yes.
in the middle of a press appearance, and other senators had to come to his assistance and bring him back to the office. And we were told it was dehydration, but boy, it sure looked like something more than that. He's definitely lost a step. Age is catching up. In fact, as he said yesterday, Father Time is undefeated. And with those remarks, he announced yesterday that he will be stepping down as majority leader in the Senate. Minority leader in the Senate. Hopefully as majority leader next year. This November, he'll be stepping down. Here's what he said.
Father Time remains undefeated. I'm no longer the young man sitting in the back, hoping colleagues would remember my name. It's time for the next generation of leadership.
Some would say that it's past time, and that, as
Sure.
usual with people in public service, he overstayed and sort of became a bit of a frustration for many conservatives who felt like we could take a harder stance on issues. He is definitely a Republican of another era. He first won the United States Senate, Patrice, in 1984 with that sweeping 49-state win of Ronald Reagan. He jokingly said that in his first term, Ronald Reagan would call him Mitch O'Donnell. And he said that was good enough for me. He ended up becoming the longest-serving leader of any party in the Senate, majority or minority leader, and he ended up with quite a legacy. I was surprised, and to me, Mitch McConnell is a mixed bag. I'm not one of the people who just absolutely can't stand him, hates him, and thinks he's been horrible. I also don't think he's the second coming. I think, like most human beings, he's a mixed bag, and when he was good, he was great, and when he was bad, he was awful. But of course, I'd like to spend most of my time talking about the good, because that's just what I do. And what I was surprised about Patrice, though, if you ask anyone, even his detractors on the left, Democrats, if you ask, what's the one thing you'll remember about Mitch McConnell, I would think both sides would agree that it's judges. It's his ability to not only make sure that conservative judges and Supreme Court justices made it through the Senate with confirmation, but frankly, even more importantly, he blocked some pretty awful liberal judges, most notably Merrick Garland, who was nominated by Barack Obama in 2016 after the death of Antonin Scalia. The pressure on Mitch McConnell to even have a hearing at the Judiciary Committee, and he refused. He said, hell no, not in a presidential year. We're going to leave it open, and we'll let the people choose the next president who will fill that slot. That president ended up being Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, and I think the fact that people were voting to fill that slot to replace Antonin Scalia was a major contributing factor to get Donald Trump elected. And, man, I remember the pressure, even from Republicans in this town and conservatives in this town, who said, oh, my, Mitch, you got to at least have a hearing. You can't just block. We can't look like we're just blocking everything. And he said, oh, no, we're blocking this. That took fortitude, and good for him.
To your point, he confirmed 234 judges during President Trump's term, including 54 circuit nominees and 3 Supreme Court justices. So that's a pretty stellar record. I mean, I think the other part of his legacy that conservatives should be proud of and frankly thankful for is the fact that he was a powerhouse fundraiser. He raised over $1.6 billion with a billion dollars for Republican candidates and to elect Senate Republicans across the country. He's probably one of the most effective fundraisers that Republicans have in the party. And so, if he's going to be on the backbench for a while, and he doesn't plan to run for re-election, as he noted previously. So that's going to be a loss. And it's interesting to see who's going to fill both the minority leadership position, but also his position as a fundraiser for conservative candidates.
Yeah, it will be, though, boy, let the games begin in terms of replacing him. And certainly Senator Cornyn and Senator Thune, the number 2 and 3 in leadership, think that they're the heirs apparent, but it doesn't always happen that way, as we've seen in the House of Representatives. When this Congress began, who thought that Mike Johnson would end up being the Speaker of the House? The Senate is a little more circumspect sometimes, but I started to say, and let me finish my thought here if I could, because I sort of lost the train of thought because I got so excited about the fact that he stopped Merrick Garland. Judges in the Supreme Court, judges and justices, and yet this is what's so maddening about Mitch McConnell and so frustrating. You could say there's good Mitch and there's bad Mitch, and so if I'm Mitch McConnell's speechwriter and I'm giving this kind of, preview of the end of my legacy and announcing that I'm retiring, and he spoke for about 8 or 9 minutes, and, I stopped watching after the first 4 or 5 minutes because I kept waiting for him to talk about his legacy, to talk about his achievements, and those first 3, 4, 5 minutes were all about America's role on the planet, the global influence he had, the international influence. It's like first and foremost in his mind was Ukraine funding. First and foremost in his mind is what America needs to do in her role as the shining city on the hill, as Ronald Reagan said. And don't get me wrong, I do think that there is American exceptionalism. I do believe that we are the shining city on the hill. I do believe that America leads the world. But when you're a senator from Kentucky and you're announcing that you're stepping down and you've had this kind of influence, take a moment to talk about what you did directly for the people of this country and for our laws and for our Constitution. Why? And this is what maddens people about him, is that these people get into Washington and they get these huge global designs, and it's frustrating. Because I didn't at that moment want to hear about how important his job was to make sure that other countries were safe. I wanted to hear what he did for us.
That's understandable. But note that he also mentioned in his speech his next chapter. And he mentioned, he put some breadcrumbs out there that this is not the end of Mitch McConnell. He's not going to be on the golf course every day. And I think maybe his next design could probably have more of a global flair to it. Yeah. We've seen former presidents certainly take up that mantle and start their own international foundations, the Clinton Foundation, and we see the ramifications of their outfits. So I suspect maybe that's why he spent so much time talking about his global impact, because maybe he's thinking about what his next step is going to be. He's probably already carved it out. But
well, listen, he does have a young wife who is still very much involved and very much engaged.
Lane Chow.
And maybe they will both be lobbyists, or you're right, maybe start a foundation. I don't know. He's got to play out this string, though, and why he's only waiting until November and not just immediately stepping down is also an interesting question. We'll get to that in a little bit more about this huge shift now in the Republican Party, the resignation, or at least the announced stepping down of Mitch McConnell as the leader of the Senate Republicans. First, though, it's 5:15
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939. Mark Levin, weeknights from 6 till 9.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
But now it's 2024. I'm now 82. As Ecclesiastes tells us, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. To serve Kentucky in the Senate has been the honor of my life. To lead my Republican colleagues has been the highest privilege. But one of life's most underappreciated talents is to know when it's time to move on to life's next chapter. So I stand before you today, Mr. President, and my colleagues, to say this will be my last term as Republican leader of the Senate. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. However, I'll complete my job my colleagues have given me until we select a new leader in November and they take the helm next January.
Now, that timing is suspect, let's say. You know, he has two choices, you would think. Step down now immediately and have a new leader come in. Or play out the string of this Congress and have the new leader come in January and be elected in January by the new senators who will be elected this November. Instead, this is a little too clever by half. He's staying through November, which it's like, okay, that means that November is election day, so he wants to stay in to have influence on the election. Whether it's influence on Biden, influence on Trump, influence on both, who knows? But that's curious. Then, between November and the first week of January, when the new Congress convenes, when the new Senate will show up, he wants to be able to pick the hand-picked successor who will be ready to go. But that means it's the outgoing senators who will be helping to pick instead of the new senators that are coming in, and that seems wrong as well. This is the problem with Mitch McConnell. It's like he's done great stuff, but even on his exit, it seems shady, you know?
I hear what you're saying. Again, I'll go back to the point I made earlier. $1.6 billion in fund money raised for Senate Republicans, and so candidates. And so I'm pretty sure his fundraising skills are going to be needed through the election. Now, that said, afterwards, that's another story. I will just point you to what the left is saying about his departure. Mother Jones, one of my favorite bath time reading, Mitch McConnell's legacy is the return of Donald Trump. And in essence, their biggest qualm with him, they admit his parliamentary skills are par none, and he's making him the most consequential majority leader ever. But their issue with him is that he didn't put his weight behind ensuring that the Senate convicted former President Trump. And because of that, now there's a Trump 2.0. And to quote this piece, he's stepping down when Republicans might fully win back the full control of the White House and Congress. So that exposes how fearful the Democrats and the left are that Republicans are going to have a sweeping November this year. And Mitch McConnell is a big piece of that.
All right, Patrice, you're winning me over here. If Mother Jones hates Mitch McConnell, he's got to be pretty good. It's 5:21. All right, so the intrigue behind this decision needs to be discussed, and that is why now? As I said, you do this at the end of the term, you do it, and if you're going to announce this right now, why not just step down right now? And you said maybe because he wants to continue that fundraising power to ensure a majority. Maybe. Or maybe it's because behind the scenes, since the disastrous attempt to negotiate a border security bill, which was obviously just a Ukraine funding bill that would have done nothing to help the border, in fact, would have harmed the border situation. Republicans, even moderate Republicans who had his back, had grown tired of the chaos in the Senate caucus. He was facing open dissent. There have always been a small handful of senators who criticized him, but now many, many more were publicly saying it's time for change. And this is his way of either, A, keeping this thing from getting public by saying, okay, fine, I'm going to leave, or maybe a way to stay on to power for the next 8 months by saying, don't get rid of me now, I'm going to leave on my own in 8 months, give me the dignity of doing that. But either way, if he didn't step down by himself, he was going to face a very ugly fight like Kevin McCarthy had, and it was he may have won, but it would have been damaging. So that is probably exactly what's going on. There's tons of reporting here saying that there were a lot of Republicans who said this was a disaster, what happened over the last month and a half, and it was because of Mitch McConnell.
Okay, well, I think that's a pretty reasonable analysis for what it could be. I still think some of the money piece of it is part of it, but
so who replaces him?
So you've got I think 2 or 3 contenders right now.
Thune and Cornyn again are sort of have been seen as the heirs apparent, but I don't see that happening. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting. See, there isn't anyone else who's been in the Senate other than maybe more of a Trump MAGA style Republican, like a J.D. Vance, maybe somebody who's not part of the traditional establishment, but maybe would shift the Senate Republicans more in a more embrace of America First policy.
A little more Trump
that would
friendly.
Be interesting.
Yeah,
more
it
Trump
is
friendly.
interesting that just a couple of days ago, John Thune endorsed Donald Trump.
Oh, really? Okay.
And one wonders if that was sort of a precursor or signal that he's, friendly with the former president, which he has been, I believe, for the most part.
I don't think they've had any serious problems.
No, Thune's one of those guys who really just sort of, he stays quiet but effective, I think. Also, Rick Scott, who has been openly critical of Mitch McConnell's leadership and very supportive of President Trump, would love to rally support. I don't know if he has the gravitas, as they say, to lead a coalition.
Yeah.
Also, Ron Johnson could be an outlier as well. There's a lot of different potential things that could happen here.
I just got to think it's going to swing more to the MAGA wing of the party than it is going to be traditional Republican establishment. That's my guess.
That would be an interesting, but certainly one other interesting thing about McConnell waiting until November, if Donald Trump does win the election for president, his opinion will hold huge influence in the Senate. Basically, if he's waiting until November, in a weird way, he's allowing Donald Trump to make the pick. So we'll see what happens there. It's 5:30 on O'Connor and Company.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36 here as we chug along on a very busy news day in your nation's capital. If you took a few hours out of the news cycle yesterday, maybe a nap, maybe actually spent some quality time with your loved ones and your family, well, you missed a lot, and that's where we're here to fill you in. What are you doing talking to your kids and your wife or husband? Come on.
Making dinner? What's up with
You've got news headlines to watch here, people. And a lot happened yesterday. We'll fill you in and also hopefully get you going with a little energy and a smile on your face. At 6:35, Tiffany Polifko, former member of the Loudoun County School Board, will recap a meeting this week that was, typical of Loudoun County. 7:05, Mary Margaret Olahan on the all-out assault on Christian churches in this country over the last couple of years. Where is the FBI on that? 8:05, Mark Morgan on dual visits of the border today. Biden in one place at the border, Trump in the other. I saw one Border Patrol agent, Patrice Onwuka, say that where the president is, where Biden is visiting in Brownsville, Texas, they have fewer border crossings there in a week than where Trump is visiting the border. They have in a day. Trump is going where the border is hemorrhaging. Where there is a flood of illegal crossings. Biden is going where there's like tumbleweeds. This is all a photo op. This is all made for TV.
Are we surprised by that? I mean, here's the truth, though. There has been enough coverage, and not just on Fox News and Newsmax. God bless both of those networks for covering the border.
Yes.
But your traditional outlets, including the Biden-friendly CNN and MSNBC, they have more than enough B-roll footage of where the actual flood of immigrants are coming from. So President Biden showing up at a nice sanitized place similar to where President Xi went to San Francisco and everything's cleaned up and looks nice.
Yeah.
People already know that it's a sham.
Oh, no, they do know. And I almost think they get a cheap thrill out of this. They know that everyone knows that they're lying. And I think the fact that they know they can get away with it almost like ups the excitement of the lies. They do it on purpose. All right, I will get to all of that a little later.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we have to talk about the woman who would be president, Kamala Harris.
Yes.
We always like delving into the deep well of wisdom that Kamala Harris brings to the table. For example,
it is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
See, I mean, you can't argue with that kind of.
You do what you're supposed to do every day.
Yeah, you kids. It's like it's like the person who writes the fortunes for fortune cookies had a seizure while writing them.
No, it's like the third grader trying to fill a page-long essay by by making these run-on sentences that say that could have been used in 3 words.
It's like, why did you say it this way? Well, it's a 500-word essay.
And I need to fill space.
Although what she said yesterday should raise red flags across the nation for anyone who cares about free and fair elections. And this she said pretty clearly without any gobbledygook. Listen to this.
Have, under the Federal Work Study program, now allows students to get paid through Federal Work Study to register people and to be nonpartisan poll workers. As we know, this is important for a number of reasons. One, to engage our young leaders in this process and activate them in terms of their ability to strengthen our community.
This is disgusting and despicable and incredibly creepy and menacing. This is authoritarian stuff. I assure you, if Trump had assigned federal tax dollars to have a legion of young MAGA hat wearing youths go work the polls, register people, and be so-called nonpartisan poll watchers and get paid to do it, we'd be hearing about how he's employing the Nazi youth to steal the election.
Absolutely.
The federal government has no business employing with our tax dollars young people to go and work at the polls. Elections are the purview of states, not the federal government.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, this is not a jobs program. This is political activism. It's like they've taken Acorn and they've federalized it with our tax dollars and manage it now through the federal government. We should have no business doing this. I'm sorry. I thought Bidenomics was doing so well that there were plenty of jobs for young people. You don't have to create these jobs for them. Unless Scott Pressler is getting paid by the federal government to go to gun shows and register people as Republicans, this thing needs to get put through the shredder.
This is a misuse of the federal work study program. Now, I, like many young people in college, I helped to fund my college tuition by having a work study program. And you know where I worked? I worked in the university, and I actually had a legitimate job. I worked, I think I worked at least one off-campus position. Federal work study is meant to supplement your tuition costs by paying you out for an actual job, not just to support whatever whatever the president wants to do, or to ensure that he gets enough votes by registering people. And you know what? Not every university, not every institution participates in the federal work study program. I think of private institutions that do not want any tax dollars, and frankly, the mandates that are attached to federal tax dollars. Suddenly, those students are not able to get their registration drives funded by the federal government. I think it's wrong. If young people want to volunteer, and they do volunteer to register their classmates, by all means. But the federal government should not be funding it. And I do think you're right about it being a state's overreach by the federal government over states' rights.
100%. And you're so right to lay it out there for us, and thank you for that. You know, Hillsdale will not be, but these won't be Hillsdale kids who are volunteering.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I assure you, if you go back when this was proposed, it was probably under Obama, maybe under Clinton, the Federal Work Study Program. I assure you that at the time, no member of Congress, no senator who proposed this or endorsed this says, and when we take these federal tax dollars to help supplement people's tuitions costs while they're going to college to get them into a job, one of those jobs will be to register voters on behalf of the federal government or to work on a poll, because red flags would have come up and senators would have said, hell no, that's corrupt. And now this is what happens. The law gets passed, they're going to work at the coffee shop on campus. And they say, well, okay, that sounds fine. That sounds reasonable. So they vote on it. They say yes. And then 10, 15 years later, you get someone corrupt like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saying, let's put them to work to make sure we win the election. This is despicable.
It's despicable.
All right, it's 5:44. We who celebrate freedom and a representative form of government where we choose our leaders through the democratic process, we have a word for countries that have one person that makes a decision that affects everybody, where one person puts themselves in a place to decide something that then everyone else must suffer under. That person is a tyrant, right? That's the word that we use.
Tyranny. Yeah.
And when it comes to Donald Trump and the 2024 presidential election, we have seen tyranny in various forms. We saw the Colorado State Supreme Court decide, 4 people in black robes decide for everyone else in the state of Colorado that Donald Trump couldn't be on the ballot. No due process. Donald Trump couldn't defend himself. That's being heard by the Supreme Court right now, or has been heard. We had a Secretary of State in Maine do the same thing for the people of Maine. These are statewide officials, either at the Supreme Court level or in Maine, the Secretary of State, who decided unilaterally and tyrannically that based on their opinion and their decision, no one else in the state would even have the opportunity to vote for Donald Trump because they believed the 14th Amendment was employed. And you thought that was bad. But Patrice, yesterday it got even worse. A Cook County, Illinois judge, Tracy Porter.
Circuit court judge, by the way.
Said to the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State, hold my PBR, because I'm going to do you one better. A lowly little circuit court Cook County judge in Illinois just decided for everyone in that state that Donald Trump can't be on the ballot. And I don't know, maybe it's me, but I think the American people cry. This is not helping them when they show what kind of tyrants they are.
It shows, number one, what kind of tyrants they are. Number two, how desperate they are. Why are you so desperate? You're at Cook County in Illinois, a state that is very likely to go for President Biden. Hey, anything can happen, but more than likely, the constituents in that state are probably, and in that county, are probably Biden supporters. So why are you so fearful that you, as a lowly judge, and she was elected in 2022, she is going to be serving until 2028. This is her second term on the bench. But why are you so fearful that you think your will needs to usurp the voting rights of the people of that county and the rest of the state? And why do you think that you think so little of them that you're willing to disenfranchise their vote by removing one candidate?
It's arrogance. It's arrogance. It's the arrogance of we know better, number one, or it's the arrogance of, well, everyone agrees with me. This is a no-brainer. Who would ever disagree with that? Either way, it's arrogance. It's the arrogance of the entitled. That's what we're seeing right here from this circuit court judge. And Tracy Porter, by the way, put in the ruling and then immediately stayed the ruling, knowing that it was going to be appealed and knowing that this entire thing is currently under consideration at the Supreme Court level anyway.
So then really it's just about raising her national profile.
I suppose, or I mean, let's face it, this is Cook County, Illinois. Maybe it's just paying off a favor.
Ooh.
You don't get politics is corrupt. And then there's Illinois politics, and then there's Chicago politics.
Ooh.
And so, I mean, who knows? Judges get embroiled in a lot of things with a lot of nefarious people, and maybe this is just a reward or a payoff for doing what is meant to be done. I don't. Sorry, when something doesn't fit into the basic democratic values and principles that a free people know, then you have to start thinking, well, there's got to be something else at play here.
What's going on?
And so, of course, the mind wanders to corruption. Either way, this is again, at this point, I think that the overreach against Donald Trump is boomeranging. Yes. It's backfiring. And guys, if he's that bad, if he's Hitler reincarnate, if he's so crooked, if he's, if he's a convicted rapist, if he's all these horrible things, what does it say about your candidate that you don't think your guy can beat him in a fair race?
Yeah.
That you have to go through these extraordinary measures to remove him from as being even an option on the ballot. For God's sake, your guy is so weak and the economy is so bad and the country is such a disaster that your guy can't beat the reincarnation of Hitler the rapist. Think about that for a minute.
Well, and you know what? Frankly, maybe they're also concerned that the numbers, when they finally come in, will expose the weakening of support, particularly in the Black community, for President Biden and trickling over to President Trump. So maybe that's also part of this equation. That's
a great point. In Chicago, we've seen Black voters speaking out against the border problem, against the illegal immigrants in their communities, about how they're being neglected. They've openly said maybe it's time to move away from the Democrats. Maybe it's time to go to Donald Trump. And the Democrats in charge of those communities said,
they will not have it.
We're going to take that choice away from you. You are stuck. You have no choice. Boy, oh boy, that's an extra level of tyrannical arrogance. Thank you, Patrice. You're absolutely right, as usual. It's 5:53.